Jos Verstappen, or affectionately referred to as Verstappen Senior, was considered the most successful Dutch Formula 1 driver until his son Max came along to take that glory away from him. Everyone knows that Max's dad is a former Formula 1 driver. Perhaps even some of you knew that even his mother is an ex-kart driver champion as well. Being surrounded by racing his whole life, Max has landed countless pole positions, podiums and wins, and it's intriguing to know more about the man that taught him the sweet science of handling a raging F1 car. He often refers to his dad as his #1 hero, which begs the question, how good was Jos Verstappen? As with most humble beginnings of racing drivers, Jos Verstappen began karting when he was 8 years old. He started participating in national championships and became the Dutch junior champion in 1984 at 14 years old. He went on to win 2 European titles, and at the end of 1991, when he was 19 years old, he finally made the transition to car racing. In his first year, he won the European Championship and was invited to race in Formula 3. 3 years after winning a few international championships later, he first got into a Formula 1 car when he tested for the Footwork Arrows, which went so well that he was contacted by every F1 team except Ferrari and Williams, eventually signing with Benetton's teams as a test driver for the '94 season. Jos has a pretty decorated racing past, but it wasn't always smooth sailing. In his first year in '94, he finished 10th place in the Drivers' Championship with Benetton. The next year when he was loaned to Simtech by Benetton, multiple technical difficulties saw him only finishing once in the 5 races that he drove. The team then went bankrupt and Jos went on to do more test driving. The next season, Jos signed with the Footwork Arrows team and initially did well, finishing 5th and 6th in Interlagos and Buenos Aires. But when the team was taken over by a different organisation, during the Belgium GP, a part of the car's suspension broke off and he crashed badly, leaving him unable to drive for a while. Again, without a regular drive and financial backing, Verstappen went on to test drive once more. When he test drove for Honda next year, it looked as though things were finally moving in the right direction. But when Honda changed their mind from being a team to an engine supplier, yet again Verstappen was without a seat. From 2000 to 2001, Jos returned to the Arrows, but the presumably impressive car turned out to be rather unreliable. Later in the year, he was meant to sign with Sauber until it was discovered that he was physically too big for the car. In 2003, he joined Minardi, where his best result was 9th place at the Canadian GP due to insufficient funds and an underpowered engine. Out of a drive for 2004, Jos joined the A1 Team Netherlands and then in 2007 took part in the Le Mans race, in which he won several 1,000-kilometer races including Catalonia, Spa and finishing 2nd at Monza. In truth, Jos was definitely a talented driver to be even in the position he was back then, but technical difficulties, lack of financial support, unfortunate crashes, last-minute decision changes by teams at a time when motorsport is not as big as it's now, well, not a lot of stars aligned for Jos Verstappen in his racing career for him to be as good as he could have been. However, who would have thought that redemption would come in the form of a blue-eyed baby boy that would go on to ask his mother for a race card at the tender age of 6? A great driver makes a great coach. From the moment Jos Verstappen put Max on a quad bike at the age of 2.5 and behind the wheel of a go-kart at the age of 4, the former F1 driver has been the tutor, mentor, and essentially the senpai behind Max's success. It was enough for Jos to see Max drive a few laps as a 7-year-old in his first racing kart that he decided that it was time to go and buy a new, bigger new one. Since the start of his career, the time and overall commitment he put to Max's career is astronomical. Something that's particularly interesting is the perspective of Max's peers in this interview conducted by the BBC in 2015. As we can see, people that knew Max back then had a similar story of karting as kids and growing up in a similar environment. But it was clear how Max Verstappen had somewhat of an upper edge with the type of coaching and guidance he was able to receive from his father. So what was it that Jos Verstappen taught Max throughout his career that really set him aside from his peers? The workshop. Verstappen has previously stated that it was hard to keep up financially at times since it was difficult to get sponsors in the early stages of Max's career. However, with the fruits of his own labour that he acquired throughout his F1 career, he was able to build out a full workshop with everything that Max could ever dreamt of. He has even stated that, everything that has an engine, we have. Testing and building. Jos Verstappen also said that he probably spent more time in the workshop than at home during the karting days. The time in the workshop was also dedicated to building and optimizing the karts that Max drove. Just seeing the absolutely packed workshop makes it evident how much time and capital was sacrificed there. In this video we can see the first kart that he built for him as a 4-year-old. Max himself could even attest to the lengths Jos Verstappen went to make his career a success. He recalls Jos Verstappen sitting in the go-kart, doing all the running while he was going about fixing a cylinder or anything else that was needed in the process of trying to optimize the kart for the championships back in the day. His dad was always there in every part of the process, trying to mold a world-class F1 driver from the early stages, and what better way to get direct help from a real pro at home? The tricks and the feeling. In documentaries and interviews, Jos has been particularly vocal about the importance of karting before moving on to the big leagues. It's with karting you actually learn the tricks and the feeling. It's where it all starts. The same things that you can change on a go-kart are the same type of things you would change on a bigger F1 car. So normally the engineering related changes work out the same way. It all comes down to intuition for Jos. As you say, you need 10,000 hours to really master your craft in any field. With years of practice, you build a sense for how your car moves. Every little change can be felt as it almost serves an extension of your own body. Verstappen 2.0. Max has jokingly said that Jos has only taught him all the good things from his career to make him Jos Verstappen 2.0. In retrospect, Jos sees himself more as an aggressive driver and acknowledges that Max is much further along than he was at this age. He's able to pace himself better. For example, he says, "At the moments that I should have stayed behind someone, I just went for it." Max does have that self-control. He taught Max that overtaking is not always necessarily good. If you overtake someone where you lose a lot of time, it's just a crappy action. He's been working on that with him since the age of 5. Since he's been there since day one, Max has always had the opportunity to passively receive all types of relevant information regarding racing. He did not always say something, but he listened, said Jos. He memorized it and thought about it in his own way. Jos thinks that part alone has influenced him tremendously. He's also said that Max is consciously and unconsciously just very well prepared. That's how I look at it. Of course, Aston Martin Red Bull Racing is reaping the benefits of this. This combination, with me first and now Red Bull Racing, has just been perfect. Earlier this year, before the season had begun, Max told their personal sponsor Car Next in an interview that he doesn't pay too much attention to the data, but instead relies on his intuition and ability to physically feel the changes in the car while driving. Interestingly, Jos is uniquely positioned to give this advice to Max because not only did he complete 106 races over his entire career, he tested a lot of cars. So much so that Verstappen was a common name to be mentioned in pit lane gossip as a replacement for underperforming drivers due to his experience as a free agent, so to speak. Jos tested for the Footwork Arrows, Benetton, Ligier, and was the first test driver for the Honda Formula 1 project. He also drove for Minardi, Tyrrell and Stewart. With that much experience under his belt, no doubt he has a lot of advice to offer his son. As Jos has said that he feels that he was more of an aggressive driver back in his day, but at that point you could actually drive like that, whereas these days you could only pull that off for a lap or two. It's no secret that the FIA is taking race regulations and implementations more seriously, and we do get flashes of Max driving aggressively sometimes too. But overall, he's matured as a driver, and it's no wonder why. His father is a veteran F1 racer and gives him advice that actually works. You'll often hear the words talent of a generation come up in the paddock in hushed whispers, as was the case for Max Verstappen. But what does that mean? That there is a finite amount of motorsport talent out there which comes around in the form of a promising new driver? Yes and no. A great F1 driver needs way more than just talent. They need a devoted engineering team, money, a lot of luck, and, did we already mention money? Financing is no doubt a big part of how the greats got where they are. If you don't have the financial backing, they need to be at least good enough for someone who has the money to believe in them and invest in the team. Max became the youngest F1 driver in 2015 at 18 years, and he unquestionably ticks all the boxes to become an F1 GOAT, but it could not have been possible had Jos not paved the way for Max by ensuring that he did not make the same mistakes as him during his racing days.